Chapter 90. A monster, huh? That's harsh. Gakane grumbled lightly, maneuvering his shadow clone. The shadow clone carrying the lightweight Gakane, who held Jimmy, hurled fearlessly towards the open window. Ah! Jimmy screamed at the sensation of falling, but what followed wasn't pain or shock. The shadow clone carrying them had landed on the ground as gently as a whisper. Gakane, next time give me a heads up before doing something like that. Sorry, I forgot in the rush. Gakane had learned during his hellish training with Yudhir that such feats were possible with his shadow clone. The shadow clone, being almost impervious to the shock of falling from great heights, proved to be a far better mode of descent from a tall castle than physically scaling it down. Let's run. They raced breathlessly towards the hill behind the castle. The hill was quite large and deep, but it wasn't difficult to locate the column of fire visible even from within the castle. When they finally arrived at the source of the fire, the scene that Gakane and Jimmy encountered was the two groups standing off against each other. One side consisted mostly of injured individuals in tattered clothes, while the other side was made up of well-armored guards led by the young nobleman, all armed and ready for battle. The two groups, weapon drawn and poised for battle, suddenly halted upon spotting Gakane and Jimmy. The first to welcome them was a burly man from the injured group. "You're Jimmy, aren't you?" "Of course, and the one with you must be Gakane." "Devran? What happened to your face?" Jimmy explained in a shock at the sight of Devran, whose face was unrecognizable due to the numerous wounds. However, Devran just smiled broadly. A small price to pay for survival. "I'm fine. In fact, I'm feeling great right now." "Devran, where have you been all this time, and who are these people with you?" At Gakane's shout, Devran pointed at the guardsmen, their weapons aimed at him. "That despicable noble tried to frame and sell me out. These friends next to me were captured for the same reason. They are all awakeners, and these here are my family." "Family?" Just as Devran said, a man resembling him, an older man, and a young woman supporting him stood beside him. It was easy to guess from their faces alone that the three were family. So the family Devran was said to have killed was alive all along. Then that means, as Gakane's face shifted towards Zakale, who stood behind the guards, Zakale, his eyes burning with rage, shouted loudly, "Do you believe that? It's all lies." "But," said Zakale, the guardsmen who were holding their weapons against Devran, his family, and the escaped awakeners at Zakale's command had expressions of utter despair. Even if they ostracized the awakeners, these were people who had lived as neighbors in a small village for a long time. Contrary to Zakale's words, they knew perfectly well that the people in front of them were the real Devran and his family. If Devran didn't kill his family, then perhaps he didn't start the fire either. Since he has returned, at the very least, we should hear what happened. One of the guards aiming the spear mumbled in a low voice. His words might have seemed reasonable to anyone else, but not to Zakale. Enraged, Zakale unsheathed the sword he'd brought with him and pointed it at guard's neck, yelling furiously, "Trying to sympathize with a murderer? You are no doubt a criminal too." "No, that's not it." The guard, his throat at the tip of Zakale's sword, turned pale and bowed his head. "I have nothing to say to the bastard who killed my father and sister. Arrest those scoundrels now." Understood." However, the guards couldn't muster the courage to step forward. They were paralyzed with fear, staring at Devran, who was stirring up a storm, and the awakeners standing next to him, showcasing their powers as if to make a point. The tension between the two sides intensified, and Gakane, who had assessed the situation up until now, acted swiftly and concisely. Devran, need some help? Standing between the two groups, Gakane spoke softly to Devran, drawing everyone's attention. It seems like you guys don't really want to fight, and we just need to deal with the young master. Isn't that right? That's true, but what are you planning to do? Devran asked with a puzzled look. Just this. What are you guys talking about? Ak! Zakel, who has been watching Gakane and Devran's conversation with a stupefied look, suddenly screamed. Gakane's shadow clone, which had quietly extended to right behind Zakel during their confrontation, abruptly rose, gripping Zakel by the collar and lifting him off the ground. Ah! What is this monster? Let me go! I said let me go! Master Zakel. The guards, who had only been on alert because Devran and the Awakeners spun around in a panic, but no one dared to approach the frailing Zakel, who was now suspended in mid-air. Seizing this opportunity, Jimmy moved towards Gakane's clone shadow, unsheathed his sword. His energy, appearing like a blue blade, was aimed at Zakel's face, causing the screams of terror to grow louder. That sword energy from such a kid. That child, don't tell me he's the nearby Awakener. Now, young master, tell your guards to step back and let's have a chat, shall we? While holding the terrified Zakel in the shadow clone's grip, Gakane flashed a gentle smile. That smile, to the eyes of the guard and Zakel, looked devilish. If you refuse, you will get to see Jimmy's sword skills. Aren't you curious about how far he can go with that? Just a graze can slice off a limb, they say. All those present, who were just ordinary people who had never seen a sword master or a knight who could handle an aura in their lifetime, were completely shaken. The sword energy Jimmy displayed before these guards was akin to a calamity. Zakel, who had secretly scorned these people dispatched for the cavalry, felt the same. Staring at the quivering sword energy close to his face, Zakel gritted his teeth and managed to open his trembling lips to speak. Everyone, step back. But young master, step back if I tell you to step back, or do you want to die in my stead? Responding to the harsh call, the guards began to reluctantly step back. Only when they had retreated far enough they could barely hear the conversation taking place did Gakane gesture to Jimmy to sheath his sword. Then, at last, Devran extinguished the enormous pillar of fire that still raged. Unlike the traces of fire that had blackened the entire village, there was no sign left where Devran's fire has been extinguished. So the remnants of the fire in the village weren't your doing, right? Of course not. Devran, who had briskly answered Gakane's question, glared at Zakel as he moved closer to Gakane. What on earth happened? Escaping all the way here and suddenly starting a fire. What was all that about? I just did as Yudhir ordered. He saved us all. He said to go out and start a fire so you guys would come and get the signal and call you out. Yudhir? Gakane, whose eyes widened slightly, then examined the faces of those behind Devran, but he could not find the familiar face. But why can't I see Yudhir? That guy said he had things to do and let us go first. I think he plans to come after he takes out all those damned bastards over there. Gakane was about to ask who those damned bastards Devran spat out with a face full of hatred were, but he refrained. It was a fact that would be known when Yudhir returned. So, the guy who was with Yudhir stayed too? There was one stranger I have never seen before. Okay, is Yudhir's message just to join us? No, he said to immediately inform the commander about what happened here and to return the way we came from Hutton. Escape? To go back the way they came. When and where Was Yudhir planning to join them? Gakane was slightly worried, but he decided to trust Yudhir's abilities and judgment. With Yudhir not here, he would have to move everyone, including Devran. There was no time to waste. All right, if the commander's assistant said so, we should follow his command. All of you, we will need to move quite a bit. Are you all okay? At Gakane's question, the awakeners behind all shouted in unison that they were fine. Although they were all injured like Devron, their faces were incredibly bright. Since Yudhir had saved them, their faith in the cavalry seemed to pierce the sky. However, only Zakel, who was tightly grasping Gakane's shadow clone, couldn't rejoice. He quickly realized that a very bad situation was occurring as he listened to the ongoing conversation. Devran, who had been sent to Apeto family due to their interest, had safely escaped, and the one who saved them was apparently going to finish things up there. It sounded absurd, but with the prisoners alive right before his eyes, there was no choice but to believe. Damn Apeto bastards! After acting so confidently, what on earth did you do?